Like I have said many times, black cabs are woven into the fabric of London. Easily identifiable vehicles that are exacting in their design to account for individual liberty, along with knowledgeable drivers who have an extensive understanding of city routes, and the respect that goes with that is what separates us from other services. And they are just two of the surface reasons why Uber is seeking to recruit black cab drivers to work on their app. Not only are they attempting to recruit drivers, they are also trying to bribe cabbies with the promise of financial incentives at the time of year when work is traditionally slow. They are also using the usual propagandized terms like partnership, which, as we know, is just another term for crappy workplace contracts. Now, I may have revisited what I think about taxi hailing apps, and for the most part, my mind is made up. My point being, the corporate apps aren't investing in taxi services per se. They are investing in scaled initiatives such as automation. And for that reason, over the years, I have taken the principled position not to use them. However, I completely understand why people do use them. There is definitely a market for a centralized booking service that benefits both passenger and driver. And the reason we did the knowledge is to afford ourselves the flexibility in the way that we work. And apps, whether we like it or not, are a significant part of that. I also doubt that participation will expedite the transition to automation. And if you are working on an app, then it is important to provide the kind of transport service that is expected of the best taxi service in the world. But what I will never endorse is cabbies entertaining the idea of partnering with Uber. Cast your mind back to a few years ago when this lot rolled unapologetically into London. They weren't prepared to wait until automation reimagined how we move about. They were intent with one main objective in mind, to run you, me and every other cab driver out of London, and were prepared to use all kinds of shady tactics in order to achieve their goal. The company also used billions from the Saudi royal family to build up a massive business that hemorrhaged money in an unprecedented attempt to kill taxi services around the world. And all the while, they told a series of narratives that insisted losses were transitional and that enduring profit was coming soon, which was a total, utter lie. Not only were Uber prepared to blow through its investors' billions in a pernicious attempt to habituate the public to its rideshare option, but they were also willing to rewrite employment laws and misclassify employees as independent contractors. Internationally, they were engaged in illegal and unethical practices including hacking, impersonating, defrauding, stealing trade secrets and wiretapping. They evaded police and regulators by using grey-balling software. They schmoozed Emmanuel Macron in France, courted oligarchs in Putin's Russia, and worst of all for us, they so easily enlisted the services of the British government to do their lobbying for them. They were a prime example of corporate capture. Corporate capture happens when corporations dominate decision-making and are able to influence outcomes to suit their own interests. But let us be clear. The whole corporate structure was to your detriment and was one of the main reasons why we held successive protests against this company and TfL executives such as Leon Daniels and Garrett Emerson, who seemed all too willing to roll out the red carpet.
Because these vehicles are cars, they may only be used as private hire vehicles for some of their time, and it's perfectly within the law to switch on and off the hire and reward insurance element of ordinary insurance, and some of the fleet operators do that extensively. So the hire and reward insurance is switched on and off only when the vehicle is being used as a private hire vehicle.
To surmount obstacles, Uber built a massive influence juggernaut for lobbying and related activities with a proposed budget of $90 million in 2016 alone. The Uber files were a confidential record that spanned Uber's dealings across 40 countries between 2013 and 2017 and reveal how the company broke the law, duped police and regulators, exploited violence against its own drivers, and secretly lobbied governments across the world. With regards to London, the document showed how Uber's lobbyists were welcomed into number 10 Downing Street, where they met senior advisors to the Prime Minister David Cameron, and recorded having a useful conversation, including intelligence on the Mayor's office. And in his former role as Mayor, it's questionable how steadfast Boris Johnson was in his support of the taxi trade. And indeed, not only did he fall at the first hurdle by dropping proposals to curb the proliferation of private hire vehicles, He was also willing to mock drivers in City Hall, knowing that he could avoid questions by having the session called off.
To all the Luddites in the room who don't want to see who don't want to see new technology, and I don't want to see new technology, and I don't count you among them. I don't count you among them, Caroline. That this will be something. This will be something.
All right. You've been told the meeting will be adjourned. Would you please clear these people out?
Uber also met with two government ministers, Sajid Javid, then Minister for Culture, Media and Sport, and Matt Hancock, then Minister for Business and Enterprise. Yes, the Matt Hancock, who shamelessly claimed that he had never heard of Uber until he got caught up in a black cab protest. Unsurprisingly, none of these meetings were ever declared. Number 10 had apparently tried to cover up its role in protecting Uber by denying that there were any records of any exchanges with the Mayor's office. But when asked to release them under FOI laws, this proved untrue. It also appeared that the regulators were prepared to borrow strategies from the government with regards to the lack of transparency.
So there have been some conversations at my level.
And are these all logged?
Sorry?
Are these all logged and we have a comprehensive record?
No, I'm afraid these are the calls themselves. The calls are logged. The calls are logged, but they're for the purpose of progressing the discussion, and they're for the purpose of encouraging a response, demanding a response, asking for clarification on the response, discussing about issues that are taking place in other markets to help us more easily understand what it is that they're trying to do. Conversations of any substance, of course, are recorded. The sort of conversations I have are the sorts of ones that seek clarification or urge responses.
Yeah, I personally, as someone looking in from outside, would think it's kind of inappropriate not to be logging these when you're a regulator.
Well,
and any other sort of quasi-judicial function. You know, in any other place, if you're in a borough and it was a planning officer, every single thing is logged because you've got to cover yourselves. And I think look at the allegations that I have made and see whether they constitute sufficient grounds. He used the word for banning Uber, but for revoking their licence. So I'd like to know when you expect to conclude your detailed investigation into Uber's business practice, as agreed by the Mayor. Wow.
The real question is not whether Uber complies with the regulations, it's whether the regulations are the right regulations for the current arrangements here in London.
When accused of breaking the rules, the company solicited customers to serve as grassroots lobbyists and sign Save Uber petitions. And when the agenda seemed in need of a scholarly push, it relied on friendly academics to produce favourable research. In fact, media outlets such as the BBC never reported accurately our side of the story. And was it any wonder when the head of the BBC News at the time was James Harding, who just so happened to be one of George Osborne's closest friends. Oh yes, George Osborne, the Uber shill. When editor of the Evening Standard was more than willing to give Uber front-page commercial prominence on more than one occasion, why wasn't his connection to BlackRock, the investment bank, whose investment in Uber was worth about £500 million, declared as a conflict of interest? He was also happy to run unfounded articles like this when the incumbent mayor found Uber not to be fit and proper. I, for one, am glad that we stood up and fought back against the injustices inflicted on us by Uber, politicians, regulators and the media. When all is said and done, Uber's business combines an exploitative labour model with a global tax structure that still robs the public purse of the tax revenue that we all rely on to keep our society thriving. And where opposition to that is concerned, none of us should be willing to go silently into the night. Now, I fully understand that people might view this as a bit of a rant. But for those drivers who weren't around in 2014, 15 or even 16, need to understand that this was a full-on fight against a multi-billion-dollar monolith that was willing to go to extreme lengths in order to annihilate the London taxi trade, to take bread from your children's mouths, and they gloated at the prospect of doing so. Remember, they were the ones that declared the war, and even today, I see this as our own post office scandal. Over the years, Uber's messaging might have changed somewhat, and they may prefer to be viewed as endearing as opposed to challenging. But just look how they've courted the press recently. Every article suggests that we've buried the hatchet. We have done nothing of the sort. It is just another tactic to hoodwink drivers and the travelling public. But think on. Considering they did their best to redefine workers' rights and continued their brutal litigation against its own workforce for over 7 years, demonstrates to me that underneath the facade, they are still the same company that they were back in 2015. And why would we want to strengthen a company that might use its position against us in the future, given the opportunity? Let us not forget, the nucleus that separates us from private hire and Uber specifically is the street hail. That's the differential. And that's what we should focus on marketing, strengthening and promoting.